Hi everyone, and welcome to the Doom Boomer. I'm Conroy Pitt, and I like to take a weekly look at the doom that is crashing down around us in the form of the four horsemen of the apocalypse: conquest, war, famine, and death. If you're enjoying these pieces, I'm going to try to go all year, so like and subscribe and leave some comments. I'd like to take one last look at the Ottawa truck occupation by the radical right activists. It's over, and the truckers are scattered in farmers' fields around Ottawa, probably trying to figure out a way to get back home or already back home. Local activists are having echo demonstrations with handfuls of people showing up to remember the good times of early February. As the officials try to pick up the pieces and figure out just what the hell hit them, another convoy seems to be headed for DC, although they've already called out the National Guard, and it's unlikely the truck protesters will have the chance to occupy a city again the way they did Ottawa. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has also diverted much of the world's attention, and it makes the convoy seem a bit self-indulgent when real despotism is on display. There are those, of course, who suspect that Putin is behind the convoy shenanigans. In one way or another, it provided a distraction for Putin when he desperately needed one. It also sows division on the domestic front and brings up people sympathetic to Putin who are willing to block major cities and transportation networks. As they look at the organization and money behind this convoy and how the people behind it were not super sophisticated fundraisers, how did they manage to get this thing off the ground? I'll have a personal insight into that in a minute. Apparently, they'd done a few local rallies, but nothing of this scale. Of course, there's an urge to see a deeper conspiracy and the deep pockets of Russian oligarchs funneled through American operatives and influencers into Bitcoin transfers in Saskatchewan to start a revolution. Maybe. But I'm as curious as anyone to see what's really going on here. I've been put in mind of a personal experience I had with a Parliament Hill protest that exploded into something hard to imagine some 30 years ago. It gave me a first-hand look at the power of the media and the drive of a story, all several years before the advent of the internet. It was the early 1990s. A young woman by the name of Gwen Jacobs from Guelph, Ontario, was hot, so she took off her shirt. She was charged by the Guelph police with public indecency or something like that. And being a hero, she said that isn't right, and she fought it in court. The outcome was that in Ontario, it is now perfectly legal for a woman to go topless in public. And you know what? Hardly anybody does. Sure, sometimes there's a little Mediterranean flair at the beach, but cultural modesties and cold temperatures have disappointed a lot of would-be voyeurs. But the fact of the matter is that it isn't illegal now for a woman to take off her top anywhere a man can take off his top. Anywhere a man is allowed by bylaw or private property rules to take off his top, a woman is allowed to as well. And that is a victory of justice. Anyway, my sister and my wife at the time were moved by the clear and antiquated injustice and decided to do something to help a sister out. So they decided to organize a rally in support of Gwen. They had never organized a rally before, so They called a couple of women's groups who were more experienced with activism. And pretty soon they were getting some local media attention. Topless Rally is a recipe for success. And I honestly don't remember all the details, but within a week or so, this was an international story. They were doing interviews on local radio and national morning television and international phone interviews with the likes of the BBC. They had absolutely nothing to do with Gwen. I think they asked if she wanted to be involved early on, and she declined. I remember the BBC interview in particular as being a vicious attack piece. On the big day, something like 5,000 people turned out with their video cameras. Humans, men in particular, can be a base, predictable lot. And at the time, it was an important social issue about choice and decency and morality. Some saw it as another domino tumbling in the established social order, and they were right, of course. People came down on one side of the issue or the other, and it became a litmus test of how progressive you were. The law was eventually changed, and women are legally allowed to go topless in Ontario now, although few, if any, do. So what does this have to do with the trucker protest convoy? Well, nothing really. It's just my personal experience with how the right idea at the right time can catch the wind of imagination like a kite. Everything isn't necessarily a conspiracy. It's fun to imagine the convoy was funded by Putin as a distraction for his invasion of the Ukraine, although the convoy people say the war is a conspiracy to distract from the convoy, so it goes both ways. I think it's more than possible that Putin funds the influencers and those who spread ideas. I think this convoy happened at a perfect time for Putin, so his influencers helped to promote and fund it. Although I think all evidence shows that it's a homegrown populist movement that's been around for a few years, influenced by Trump politics and united in hatred for Justin Trudeau. I'm old enough to remember the hatred for the first Trudeau in the 1970s. So this culture war the MSM has been on about is nothing new. It used to be reactionary politics, a desire to return to the status quo, the previous political state of society, which they think possess positive characteristics absent from modern society. It was people who were afraid of progress or the changing world. I think we've moved beyond that, and now the radical right is actively trying to change society. They've embraced new communications, technologies, and they want to dictate government policy. And the government itself to steer society more towards a Christian authoritarianism like Margaret Atwood so accurately described in *Handmaid's Tale*. The Topless Protesters never had a memorandum of understanding calling for the Prime Minister to step down and for a coalition of opposition parties and topless women to form government. If only. So that's it for now. I'll take another look at Russia soon and see where we're at with COVID and climate change. There's a lot of doom to catch up on. So until next time, if there is a next time,